Hello, hello, hello. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming today. So there's a question on lots of people's mind lately and in the news. And the question is, when will we have a vaccine for coronavirus? Good question, isn't it? This pandemic has gone on much longer than anybody expected. There's having second and third waves. And a lot of people are kind of fed up with it and we're ready to change. So I want to approach this question not so much scientifically as metaphysically, which is also a form of science, but it's a higher form of science. We have to recognize that everything that occurs in the outer world is really a symbol of something occurring in the inner world. It's said that the world is your mind pushed out. So whatever you're seeing out there has something to do with what's going on in here. Edgar Cayce said that mind is the builder. Mind is the builder. And you've heard me say, we think in secret and it comes to pass. Environment is our looking glass, which means that if you want to know what's going on in your mind, you look at what's happening in the supposed outer world. The Course in Miracles says there really is no outer world. Everything that seems to be going on out there is really going on in here and it's projected outward. So whether you're seeing health or disease, love or hate, war or peace, those are all projections of your own thoughts, individually and collectively. So if we want to change something in the outer world, we have to change it first in the inner world. Course in Miracles also says, seek not to change the world, but choose instead to change your mind about the world. So we want to reverse the playing field and recognize that it's not an outer manipulation we're going for, but it's really an inner shift. Now, this does not deny the fact that people are working on a physical vaccine, which is wonderful, and it will happen in some form or another. But we want to go back, we want to reverse cause and effect. We have been led to believe that the environment is the cause and our mind or our experience is the effect. But it's really the other way around. Our mind is the cause and the outer world is the effect. So we want to work at a causational level, not an effect level. So what we want to do is heal our minds first before attempting or waiting for the world to heal. So what we want to do is build spiritual immunity from the inside out. If we're looking for a physical vaccine to immunize us, we really have to do our homework and do a spiritual immunity first. That's the only way things really work. It seems like it's the other way, but it's really not. And so, I used to do organic gardening, and I read all these books on how to keep pests out of your garden. And they say you'll put beer out and the slugs will go on them, and you use rotenone to get rid of these aphids and so forth. And after the manual would give all these physical cures, it would always say the same thing. It would say, but the best immunity is to grow your plant in healthy soil. In other words, when you have solid nutrition, so then you have natural immunity, and you don't need beer and rotenone and all this stuff to repel pests. So what we want to do is apply this to our spiritual situation. We want to nourish ourselves spiritually so much from the inside out that we develop a natural, organic immunity to disease. Now, why am I saying this? Because as we do this as individuals, it ripples out and affects the world. Now, when we get a virus, when everybody's damn sick and tired of the virus, when we get a vaccine, when everybody's damn sick and tired of the virus, in other words, the answer is whenever you're ready. And, over the past years, there's been a sense of vulnerability politically. There's been a sense of victimization, a sense of separation. And so I think one of the reasons this pandemic has come on a worldwide basis is that people have been feeling more vulnerable than they have in a long time. When you feel vulnerable, you become vulnerable. It is literally possible to be in the presence of a pandemic and not be touched by it. And I said once before, I'll repeat it again, there was an experiment that the US Navy did many years ago at the height of a big flu pandemic. And they took 50 sailors, and the sailors volunteered to be inoculated with flu germs, and they breathed flu air, and they interfaced with influenza patients. And the experimenters just sat around and waited for these sailors to get sick so they could study the symptoms. Well, guess what? Not one of the 50 sailors got sick, even though they were in severe influenza conditions. And the answer is not physical, the answer is metaphysical, because they had no fear or resistance to the disease. They were willing to go through it. They weren't afraid about it. They just walked through the process, and their sense of I'm okay anyway was enough that there was no place for the disease to get to them. There was nothing in them that was a match to the disease. And so what's happening, my friends, is that we're being called as individuals and on a global level to rise out of a sense of vulnerability and victimization, believing that we're at the mercy of external forces symbolized and manifested by the virus. We have to recognize that as we choose to be healed, we will be healed. And when a vaccine comes along, hopefully sooner than later, it will not be the cause of the end of the pandemic, but it will be the effect of our choice to end the pandemic from inside. You see, everything outside is a manifestation of internal choices. And A Course in Miracles also tells us that all disease is a choice and all healing is a choice, and this works individually and collectively. And the Course says that when you're faced with any disease, you could stand up and say, I have no use for this. I have no use for this. And the Course says you could be healed instantly. So when we have no more use for the pandemic, it will go away. And as we approach our election in the United States, both political parties are attempting to leverage the pandemic in their own favor, attempting to use it to win the election. And so there are all kinds of political agendas that are associated with the pandemic. And, it's so interesting when one person decides they are free of fear, then miracles happen. And it can happen collectively as well. And I might have mentioned before, but I'll tell you again. I saw a wonderful video of Mother Teresa, who in 1982 went into Beirut, Lebanon, when there was a war going on. And there was a children's hospital, and she wanted to rescue these children from the war. So she announced she was going in, and she got some trucks and a bunch of her nuns, and they entered Beirut during this war. Well, what happened was, when the warring factions heard that she was going in to save these children, they had to cease fire. And so this video shows these trucks going through war-torn Beirut with soldiers from the opposing armies on both sides of the street, standing quietly in respect of her on her mission of mercy. And she went in and she scooped up these kids, and she got out of the hospital, out of the city. And then as soon as she left, they went back to shooting each other. Crazy, huh? But it proves that sincere love has the power to manifest physical miracles. It wasn't just a philosophy, it was a philosophy with a result. And many years ago, I went to Russia with a group, and Soviet Union at the time, and they took us to this village out in the country somewhere. And this village had traditionally, for many, many years, venerated the Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary. And the story went that there was a huge plague that was scourging the countryside, And no one in that town got the plague, even though there were many, many people around them who were dying of it. And so they had a bubble of protection around, you might say, a healing energy around them. Now you could say, well, okay, it was either the Mother Mary actually really came and intervened and saved them, which could be totally valid. Or you could also say that their faith made them safe. And Jesus even said this in the New Testament, as somebody came and he was healed, the person was healed, and he said, your faith has made you whole. Your faith has made you whole. Now let's look at this metaphysically. You don't become whole by faith. You recognize your wholeness by faith. So let's say you want to have faith that there'll be a vaccine or somehow the pandemic will go away. Well, the faith does not make us whole. The faith makes us recognize we're already whole. In other words, you don't become immune. You recognize you've already been immune. And it's an interesting thing about faith because faith can work through any one of a number of different avenues. Faith gives different objects permission slips to heal you. Back in the 1950s, there was a psychologist named Eysenck, and he did a cross-cultural study of healing. And he studied medical doctors and chiropractors and faith healers and voodoo and witch doctors and acupuncturists. He did a cross-culture study of healing. And he found that all the healers had the same success rate. He found pretty much that 1/3 got better, 1/3 stayed the same, 1/3 got worse. And that was true for witch doctors as well as medical doctors. How interesting is that? So the people were healed not because of the witch doctor or the acupuncturist method. They were healed because they believed in that method. And, in West Bengal, India, there's an interesting phenomenon. It's a rural area. People there have a superstitious belief that if you get bit by a dog, you're going to be pregnant and give birth to puppies. It's crazy, isn't it? But people believe all kinds of odd things. And what happens in that culture is after they get bit by a dog, they go to the local shaman, and he gives them some herbs and yogurt. And he says, you're no longer pregnant with puppies. And they say, thank you, and they walk out and they're free. Well, we all know they weren't pregnant in the first place, but their faith made them whole. And so in the West, we have faith in pills and drugs and injections and vaccines. We believe that that kind of stuff heals. Now, you can all argue with me and say, well, that really does heal. Well, it heals, yes, it does, but it heals more by belief than it does by fact. And if you lived in West Bengal or you lived in Africa, you might go to a shaman or a witch doctor, or you might go to a New Thought minister, and they would come up with an affirmation that would offset the pandemic. So the question is, okay, the question is not when will we get a vaccine? The question is when we will get the affirmation. Okay, please, God, give us the affirmation that will offset the pandemic. And then somebody will come up with an affirmation, oddly enough, right around election time. And we do the affirmation and the pandemic would disappear. So we want to work from the inside out, healing, all healing. All healing. Did I say all healing is an inside job? And the vaccines and the doctors and the affirmations and the methods and the hands-on, they're all just permission slips that allow us to choose what our mind is choosing anyway. Course says you don't need any. Course Miracle says you do not need any. You don't need a doctor. I'm not against doctors. Doctors have helped me. I love doctors. I bless doctors. And if you want to go to a doctor will help you. Please do it. But remember that the doctor is the agent that you have chosen to play out your intention for better or worse. If the doctor heals you, it's because you chose to be healed and you use the doctor as an excuse to get healed. If your doctor does not heal you, it's because you chose to not be healed and use the doctor as an excuse to play out your intentions. This is the power of the mind with which we have been imbued. It says in Genesis that we were created in the image and likeness of God. What does that mean? It means that God gave us the power to create with our minds. That's the image and likeness of God. So God is pure creativity, and God spewed us forth, if you will, or birthed us forth as extensions of God. We are all rays of the sun, and everything that is in the sun is in the ray. And so, because God is created by nature, our minds are created by nature. And so we get to create with our minds, which is the greatest gift that a God could give her offspring, the power to create. So we have the power to create a global pandemic, and we also have the power to undo a global pandemic. And the way to do that is start to remove from your mind thoughts of vulnerability, thoughts of victimization, thoughts of weakness, and to replace those thoughts with wholeness that you already are. We're not getting whole, we're remembering we are whole. And as you walk in wholeness, you become a force for wholeness. And automatically, even without a word, you lift others to your sense of wholeness. You say, hey, I'm whole. Would you care to join me in wholeness, my brother or sister? Would you care to step out of fear with me and into trust? Let me take your hand. I know you're afraid. I understand. I've been afraid too. But I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of being quarantined. I'm tired of having stuff shut down around me. I'm tired of having the news blare coronavirus 24/7. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. Ready for a change. And so as each of us moves from the inside out, the world will move with us. That is the power, because the world is in you more than you're in the world. So when will the vaccine come? Whenever ready. Could be today, could be next week, could be in a month or two. But the real vaccine is the spiritual vaccine, which is the only way anything ever really gets done in the manifest world. Hope that's helpful to you. Speaking of healing, today we are starting my Master Keys of Healing series. It's an 8-week webinar series that will talk about all the dynamics of healing. What we've done today is just touched on the surface. If you'd like to join me for very, very intimate, intensive seminars for 8 weeks, go to my website, alancohen.com, and I'd love to meet you there. Okay, all is well. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you next week. You're in my heart. And we are whole. That's all we need to remember is we are whole. We were created whole. And so it is.